in filler from other places, that it's not like the filling that they dug out of these places.
So it's not the scrap from the stones like that they carved up?
Yeah, and it's not like, because, you know, these are all of these spaces are like in the earth a little bit, all of these structures. So it's not like the stuff they pulled out of these holes that they dug to build in. It's like stuff from kind of far away, so it seems.
Have they actually like taken samples of some of this stuff and gone around and done geological surveys to see if they can figure out where it came from?
Yeah, and they found debris from up to like 100 miles away.
Interesting.
So that, you know, that supports, it wasn't intentional. It was intentional that they filled this in.
It's not like erosion buried.
Yeah, and it seems to have been a really peaceful filling, if that makes sense. That, like, if it was a group that wasn't the group that was in charge of this place or that built this place, they were very respectful of it. They took the time to really fill it in and try and make sure that all the stones were filled in really well, almost as if they were preserving it, which is really interesting.
Or afraid of it.
Yeah, maybe. You know, I just think it's really interesting given where we were in the, like, again, you know, I'm going to say
stage of evolution.
Yeah, I'm going to say
of man. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to use the term currently accepted because I think that the big interesting part of this is that it may force us to reconsider how human evolution happened and when it happened.
Which, by the way, we probably ought to be doing all the time because new evidence pops up all the time.
Yeah.
So
no, it doesn't. Not according to my science book from 5th grade. It's the same. It's always the same.
So they've only excavated like 5%, they think, of this structure.
So there's a lot to go.
There's a lot to go. So there may be more stuff that we find.
Including alien artifacts.
How long have they been digging this thing up?
So they found it in 95, and I don't think they started digging it up until a couple years after that, and it's been kind of touch and go, and as far as people actually excavating it. But I mean, you know, more than 5 years.
Yeah, and if it's in Turkey, you got to think. Okay, well, if we think about, we always see those TV shows where, let's say, it's somewhere in Egypt, they're rapidly digging everything up, and the one thing that nobody ever talks about, usually they can't excavate all year long because in the summer, in anywhere that's in this part of the world, it's super hot.
Yeah,
true that.
And I know that in
Turkey gets cold in the winter too.
Cold and rainy, so you can't dig up. So I'm guessing best 6 months a year they can dig up this thing.
And don't forget, like, you know, archaeologists, they can't just go in there with a pickaxe and a shovel. They usually work with a plastic spoon from McDonald's and a toothbrush.
It's about the size of what they do.
And they sort of go like, you know, and then they stop and make notes in their notebook. And
and on top of that, since they found that, like, this was intentionally backfilled, you know, often in archaeological sites like this, if you know it's like these big monolithic stones, you can kind of just, like, you don't totally discard what you're finding.
But you don't have to worry about it.
But you don't really have to worry so much about that. And like this, they're saying, well, like, this is part of it. We have to preserve literally every bit of rock that comes out of this place just to, you know, see if we can find out any information from any of it.
So archaeology has changed since the days of Indiana Jones.
Yeah,
he
just went
to the temple and grabbed the most valuable items and ran out.
Yeah, unfortunately.
What a bummer.
Yeah. They've radiocarbon dated this place, and, you know, people are just really astounded that it exists. I mean, conservative estimates put the invention of the wheel 2,000 years after the building of this place.
Okay.
You know, I've seen these images of people like using logs and they're like rolling these stones along, but, you know, and I don't know when people figured out that worked.
I think that probably the first time somebody stepped on a round rock and it slid up from their slip. The wheel was probably invented and then lost and invented and lost, you know, many times during human history.
Yeah.
Wait, okay, so I don't know that. How old did they say this is?
10,000 BC, so 11 to 12,000 years old.
Okay.
They've estimated it would have taken 500 men per pillar to move it from the quarry.
You're talking about just lifting and carrying? Just
lifting and carrying, or pushing again. I mean, you know, it's like 50 tons.
A 20-foot long rock, good luck getting 500 men underneath it.
It's just, I mean, it is a giant project, and you know, we're still in our hunter-gatherer phase. We're not really starting with big tribes or anything like that. For, you know, that many people to have worked towards something that wasn't necessary for survival is kind of mind-boggling in a way.
Kind of is, yeah.
You know,
it makes you wonder too if they actually had domesticated some beasts of burden.
Yeah,
at the time. And I don't think there's any record.
I just think, one of the things that makes this place so interesting is that, it's a massive amount of work, but people aren't really like, well, it's totally unreasonable that people could have moved those stones. We're not talking about Stonehenge where we're like, well, how did they get them on top of there? That's okay. Those are big stones and people moved them and, whatever. And that's a mystery in and of itself, but we can understand how people could have moved these, but that's like more people than we thought would have been together in a spot working towards a common goal.
Mm-hmm. Precisely.
And we think of these people as kind of figuring out how the bow and arrow works, but not really concerned about their spiritual well-being, right? So that's, another part of it is that if it were clearly a place where, everybody was hunting people or hunting animals and, it was a survival place, it would make more sense, but it doesn't seem to be that. And so that's really astounding.
It is. But here's the thing that bothers me whenever we're looking at a monolithic site.
Okay.
So we always say that it is X number of years old. And that is always based on radiocarbon dating.
Yeah.
The thing that bothers me, and I think I mentioned this to you guys before, is when we've done monolithic sites, is something I could never wrap my head around. I finally figured out what it is, which is my problem is that carbon dating can only be done to biological material. So if it's a stone, we can't carbon date it because it's eons old because it's a hunk of the earth.
Sure.
So all we can do is whatever organic material we find at the site is what we can base our dates upon.
Sure.
The reason that we can't do it on anything but organic material is because the way carbon dating works is we all have carbon in us. I mean, we're carbon-based life forms.
Yeah.
Aren't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. But we all have carbon-12 in us, but there is what's called carbon-14, which is present in all of us, but in very small amounts. And carbon-14 has this half-life of 5,700 and some odd years, basically 5,800 years.
Okay.
And that's its half-life. So they know the approximate amount of carbon-14 that's in the air or in the atmosphere and in plants at that time. So they know how much should be there, and then they do the math from there, how much of it is broken down. Okay, well, that makes sense, but then if we're going into a site that's all stone, there's not a lot of biological material left over, and especially on a site like this where it's been backfilled, I've got to, and not that I don't recognize how phenomenal the site is, but I've got to ask, how sure are we of this number? Because these pieces of material that we're dating, which there's not a whole lot of it sounds like that they're finding, if it's backfilled and they're digging up somewhere else to cart material in, well, that could be older material that's in the ground, older organic material that's already been breaking down for God knows how long.
Sure.
This is true.
They transfer it in. So this is the one that, I mean, it makes me question the whole date. It's amazing if it's as old as they say it are, but I wonder.
Yeah. But I know that from my own experience, like say if you get, you know about my pile of concrete slabs in my driveway.
Yes.
For example. Keeping organic material out of that is hard. So if they chiseled up all this rock or busted up all this rock from somewhere else and transported it to the site and dumped it in, it's almost a certainty that some leaves and stuff like that would get in there. And so maybe that's what they're basing their dating on. I mean, I'm not sure.
Well, yeah, again, but it could be that they went down the other side of the hill and they started digging a hole to dig up dirt,
and they dug up some old stuff.
And they dug up some old stuff. So
that's always possible too. I mean,
I'm not saying that the age is wrong. I'm just I have a hard time swallowing it, knowing that there's this bit of an issue when it comes to monolithic sites.
That's fair. And, I didn't do any research on that because literally everyone I've read about on this, and they're all pretty impressive accredited scientists and archaeologists, have also not had a problem with the carbon dating. So when I was doing my research, I've just kind of been taking it on faith that, like, if this were an issue, if they really had questions about it, somebody would have brought it up. And it doesn't seem to be the case. I mean, if anything, people are saying it's probably older than this carbon dating is saying it is, which is, an interesting thing in and of itself. But it seems that when people are saying, oh, it's, 1,200 or 12,000 years old, that it's a kind of a conservative estimate.
Yeah, and it could very well be. It could also be that because they're all involved in the project, they're all drinking the Kool-Aid, to use the old term.
That's true.
It's a little herd thinking. I mean, I would have to actually talk to one of these guys and find out their methodology.
Yeah.
So if they're excavating all this stuff, I mean, if you pluck some piece of debris out of there and radiocarbon date it, well, that's a little sketchy. If what you're doing is getting every little bit or from all over the place, of varying depths and varying locations, and you're pretty much getting the same reading. That would be to me an indication that probably they're getting an accurate estimate.
Yeah. And again, I never saw how much material they were finding, other than
I had no idea.
Some stuff that said that it wasn't a lot.
Yeah, you got to kind of hope these guys actually know what they're doing. We're taking a little bit of stuff on faith here.
I really hope that they were doing a lot.
Yeah. There's one lead archaeologist on this thing, and his team, or the team that's working on it. But everybody else who does writing about it isn't actually like a part of the excavation of this project.
Got it.
So they're all kind of independent. It's essentially being peer reviewed.
Reporting and peer reviewing. Okay.
So as far as I can tell, nobody really has a problem with this.
And I don't know. It just one of those things that always crops up.
No, that's totally fair.
When I think about these things, it always.
Well, there have been some pretty big errors in the past in carbon dating. There have been. So I mean, it's a reasonable issue to bring up.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. All right, so we've got some theory. I'm assuming you've got theories.
We have just a few theories.
Oh,
theories about what?
The sarcasm in your voice.
About why they did it, or how it was done.
Why they did it mostly.
Okay.
The how it's done.
Pretty obvious. They chiseled it and stood it up.
I guess. I mean, there's not really a lot of theories on it.
Okay.
I mean, we'll talk about some stuff maybe, but I mean, most of the stuff is, it's. The mystery of how they did it is kind of, I think at this point, people just accept that it means that we have to reevaluate how capable prehistoric humans were.
Which is what Joe was saying before. Yeah, okay.
We're able to actually make metals, like bronze at least. But let me ask you this. Sorry if I'm jumping ahead or anything, but have they found the place where these stones were quarried from?
Yes, they have. And they were quarried in, quote, Neolithic times, which is like this time, but also in more classical times. They found big gashes in the earth where they thought the big stones were probably taken from. But I can't find any information on like where this quarry is. It's close.
Right. Yeah.
It's pretty close. They call it the plateau.
Well, then again, if you think about it, they may not. If they're still doing all this research, there may be a certain amount of information that you want to hold back, so that not every Tom, Dick, and Harry runs out there to check it out and take their own piece of the rock and say, "Look, this would destroy a site." On
yeah, so
there's that, but also I mean, I suppose. What I was curious about was whether there were any unfinished T-shaped slabs or anything like that. But now that I think about it, I suppose that those quarries probably would have been in use for thousands of years afterwards.
There's a mention of the Romans quarrying some of it for like watchtowers and stuff. So it's been in use for a long time afterwards.
Quite a long time, yeah.
So again, they have these like big trenches. They think this is probably where this rock came from, but they don't actually know about any of that.
Okay.
So, all right, ready to get some theories in here?
Heck yeah!
Theories, right on.
Theories up in here. Okay.
Are there any aliens, by the way?
Yes.
Cool.
The first theory, so it's a temple, like a normal human temple. That's a good theory. It's a pretty good theory, right?
Yeah.
So most scientists agree this is probably the first example of what's called a cathedral on the hill, which would have been the first place that people would have taken pilgrimages to. So this is interesting for a lot of reasons. They've found a lot of butchered bones and artifacts in this area that shouldn't be around for like 100 miles, which kind of suggests that people came from a distance.
What kind of
things.
artifacts, like beer cans?
No, like plant materials and.
Well, if it's butchered bones, that means it's animal carcasses that you know,
they're either doing sacrifices or they were chowing down.
Wow.
right,
and
which that would actually discredit my concern about the carbon dating, because if it's animal bones, you can carbon date the heck out of those.
It's not just animal bones.
Well, bones.
But it's bones.
Yeah.
There's lots of bones. They think it was a cult of the dead type of a place, which is instead of worshiping gods or anything like that, you bring your dead to this place, probably like wrapped in shrouds.
It's
or
a
something
giant
like
burial
that.
site.
Basically, yeah. And then the
cemetery.
animals would just watch over your ancestors.
The animals
dead
that are
Guard their
carved in.
yeah, the
souls and all
carved
that
animals.
stuff.
The problem with this is they haven't found any tombs. They found a lot of bones, like sacrificed bones of animal and human.
Oh, and humans, right?
But they haven't found any tombs, anything that looks like an intentional burying of dead people, which it's been clearly documented that, thousands of years prior to this, Cro-Magnon man, Homo sapiens all started burying their dead in like a fetal position. Mm-hmm. So that's we've already had that in our history. So the problem with the idea of a tomb situation is they haven't found any tombs.
Yeah, the whole problem with that theory too is that it's dangerous to be around a rotting corpse for very long, especially back in those days.
Yeah.
So I think that people probably would have buried their dead and maybe made a pilgrimage later on to pay respect to them at this place.
Yeah. So there are a couple other really interesting things that happened near this site. One of them is that really close to this area, geneticists have traced the first DNA of domesticated wheat to this area, within 20 miles of this hill. So that would have been the first instance of agriculture in our history.
So yeah, an indication that there was some sort of civilization actually.
That there was some kind of shift in societal norms happening here. This is really the first place that you see that happen. There's also kind of some speculation that it's the first accounts of animal husbandry. One of the things they talk about a lot is that up until now, in the paintings that you see, the cave paintings, stuff like that, any animal that's depicted is pretty much depicted in a state of either attacking somebody or being attacked by somebody. So as in a hunter-gatherer society.
It's in the hunt.
Yeah, it's in the hunt, or, they're hunting you or you're hunting it. And this is the first instance of animals being depicted, even predatory animals, we said one of those reliefs looks just like a jaguar or something. Mm-hmm. Animals that are traditionally, against us being depicted in just a normal passive state. Mm-hmm. Which is also kind of interesting. So they're talking about this maybe being the first instance of domesticated animals in this kind of situation, or at least a shift in thinking towards what animals might be for us, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. There could be allies, not just enemies or food.
Yeah.
And again, this is one of those things in this story that got me thinking about how we look at this stuff. Mm-hmm. Because I'll be honest, I remember looking at one of the photos, and the photo said, "This is a fox." And I looked at it, and I thought, that's a big, ugly lizard. Uh-huh. It didn't look like a fox to me.
I thought it looked like a rock.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, that's really an interesting thing, too.
Well, but so what it got me thinking, though, is that from our point of view today, mm-hmm. because of the way that information goes, we know what just about every critter in the world looks like. Mm-hmm. But at that time, they didn't. Mm-hmm. So they may have been trying to depict something else, whether it be, in the dark, I saw this thing, and it's this mythological whatever that they've built something around, a story mm-hmm. around. But to us, we're going, oh, it's a cute little fox. I totally get it.
We're projecting a little bit, maybe?
Yeah, it's exactly the word I'm looking for, is we're projecting what we know onto it.
Yeah, and we can talk a little bit about that. I have some stuff to say about that a little bit.
Great.
But it's true that there are carvings of animals that, you look at and you're like, what? That doesn't exist in Turkey. and it never has. And it's fairly clearly an animal. Like, anyways, we'll get into that.
Okay,
later.
all right, yeah.
So-
Sorry, I didn't mean to jump ahead.
No, that's totally fine. So one of the other things is that a lot of people are saying these are depictions of gods, which is kind of a problem because it's 5,000 years too early. Although it's the same place, Mesopotamia, right? The Fertile Crescent.
It's too early for what, God?
It's too early for gods.
Why?
It's too early for gods. This is the first time. I mean, the fully formed depiction of a god that sits in the sky. We've had idols, right? And we've had ancestors before then, but not gods. It's a really big anthropological discussion that happens. But essentially, about 5,000 years later in Mesopotamia, we see the first instance of gods.
So when you say it's too early for gods, what you're saying is that we don't have any record of people recording these beings that they're worshiping. Is that what you mean?
Or any implication that they are worshiping anything.
Okay.
There's been a cult of the dead for a long time as like a reverence to your ancestors. There's some, using of idols, sort of, recognizing that there are things that are bigger than us, but like a fully formed idea of like a god, like an omnipotent sort of
Another being above us.
A being above us that maybe created us, a creator situation, that apparently doesn't exist until much later.
How do they know this?
Again, just
This is what's available in the record.
Radiocarbon dating.
yeah, pretty much. So there's a kind of a sub-theory on this, and that's the Orion sub-theory. It basically says that...
and this is Orion, the constellation, I assume?
The constellation, yeah. And there's a lot of discussion that we'll talk about later that every monolithic stone thing from the past ages was to Orion. Okay, fine. Fine. But Orion is pretty prevalent in the sky, especially at this time of our planet's history.
Yeah.
So they talk about what we were talking about a little bit earlier with the arms, and there are some of the carvings that have like belts, like really clear belts on them.
Something that's ornate that looks like a belt.
That looks like a belt, yeah.
I'll run with that.
Yeah,
But if they were modeling it after Orion's belt, wouldn't it just be 3 dots?
Yeah, because they wouldn't have belts like us. I know.
I know.
So this is the thing, is that like...
That looked like a Coach belt.
Yeah, I mean, so like even the people who are kind of making this claim feel like it's a really weak theory right now.
It's
kind of like an idea they're throwing out there, and it seems to be in the really early stages, and they're kind of saying, well, we could see it being this, but we don't really know. We don't really have any good information on it yet, so we're just going to throw it out there. And if people connect the dots for us, great. If we continue to find information that connects the dots, great. But
That's a great pun.
Connect the dots.
Yeah.
Belt.
All right, yeah. The problem I have with this theory is that we know Orion, the constellation, as Orion the Hunter. That doesn't mean that people 12,000 years ago would have looked at that bunch of stars and said, oh, wow, check it out, it's a hunter. Yeah, it's a human. I mean, there's no reason to think. I mean, if you look at most constellations, they don't look anything like what they're supposed to represent.
I agree.
It's a very loose translation.
It's extremely loose. I mean, and there's no reason to believe that anybody would have interpreted Orion, the constellation, as even being a humanoid, much less being a hunter.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of historic references to Orion being a hunter. I mean, from the Greeks, the Romans, Mesopotamia. Fine, but again,
doesn't
that's
mean
all
it goes back
much
this far.
Yeah, so
maybe,
but it might.
Maybe
we don't know. So, Joe, the next theory is for you.
What? Chupacabra?
Ancient aliens.
Oh, even better.
Yeah, even better. So, of course, this is a theory, right? I mean, of course it is. Who didn't see this coming? It's a theory for Stonehenge because people can't figure out how Stonehenge was made, and that's like 6,000 or 7,000 years later.
Yeah. Aliens.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Of course it is. And I think it does go a little bit towards Joe's question of well, how? I personally choose to believe that it's totally possible that humans made this stuff at that point in time. I don't think it's outrageous to think of, but I do understand that a lot of people have a hard time
without steel tools. It'd be awfully hard to quarry stone.
Sure,
it really would be, but or at least copper or bronze or something.
Yeah. So one of the big selling points of this theory is that, as Joe mentioned, they haven't found any stone carving tools in the site. which I think to a lot of people is like really, really like, oh my gosh, it was aliens. To me, all signs point to the making and then like very frequent use of this place. Right. So like, I guess
they
if
wouldn't
you go
leave
into
the tools laying around for 100 years.
Like if you go to a modern church and you're like, oh man, there's so much ornate stuff in here, but I
don't
can't
see any
find
tools on the floor.
I can't find
I know.
how they plated this gold in this place. Oh, it must be aliens. For me, that doesn't really hold water.
The other thing to think of, is that if this is as old as they say, you know how one of the easy ways that you can break rock apart is with another rock. So you take two rocks and you start beating them against each other, and eventually they're both gonna crumble.
But not in a...
My tool gives way.
Yeah, the only problem I have with that theory is it's great for sort of breaking a rock down into smaller pieces, but if you look at some of the carvings, those look like they had to have been done with more precise tools and just banging a rock.
Yeah, but to be fair, we are in the Stone Age. I mean, we're in the Stone Age, but we're in the Stone Age, so, we do kind of know how to work rock. I mean, you find some other idols that are carved. This is an incredible detail amount, but, I guess...
It's the same thing as looking at, the obsidian arrowheads that we see from Native Americans and other cultures. Those things are beautiful in their own right, and they're all very precisely done with a rock.
Yeah.
It's one rock against another.
Yeah.
Knowing exactly how a rock breaks isn't that technical. Once you've done it a couple thousand times, you just keep breaking it. Oh, okay, well, now I kind of understand how this is going to break apart.
Yeah, I mean, they could have made tools also out of obsidian. Had to have bronze or copper or whatever. It just means that, you're going to be spending a hell of a lot of time carving out your T-shaped rock from the quarry.
Yeah. Again, it's like, well...
That might have been, thinking back to those times, think about this. Your grandfather actually started working on quarrying this T-shaped rock, and you're like down there, okay, we're getting close to done here, It's something, it's still not quite quarried out.
Yeah,
it could have been that.
That's a big mystery for sure, and I think that really helps to explain why people are so prone to going to something like Ancient Aliens, because it makes much more sense to a lot of people to say, oh yeah, they use plasma cutting tools.
Yeah, the aliens gave us a laser.
Yeah.
And we cut it apart with that. Then we carved it by hand from there.
And then we sort of chipped it up to make it look like like quarried by ancient man instead of cut out of the rock by alien plasma.
Yeah. So there, as Steve was kind of saying a little bit, the next part of this is a little more solid to me. You see things in these carvings like geese, and they're pretty clearly geese. I mean, you look at it and you're like, that's definitely a goose, which never existed in Turkey, nor do they have any records of it ever having existed in Turkey.
Okay.
So people talk about well, it was aliens, because aliens were like, hey, carve a thing that looks like this. That exists a lot in the world. I think that actually feeds a theory that I have a little later, a little better than the ancient alien theory, but that it seems to get kind of clumped in there with the aliens.
Well, again, let's not say that it's a goose per se, but if you see birds flying around all the time, there are birds that have big bodies, and there are birds that have long necks and big wings, and there's all kinds of birds around that are like that that aren't necessarily geese.
Precisely.
So it could be that it was some indigenous bird that has died out or was hunted out, or God knows it might have been the dodo for all I know. But
it could be also that the aliens look like geese.
It could be. It's true.
Yeah.
I guess I don't want to belabor this too much. I'm just saying that I don't buy that it's goose.
That's fair. I think, there are other instances, but again, we don't 100% know what was there then.
True.
So maybe there were.
But we don't know
things.
what wasn't there.
Yeah.
Which wouldn't say, there's not geese in that area.
The whole Middle East, being the cradle of civilization and everything, was subjected to quite a bit of environmental abuse, and it used to be forest land and grassland, and now it's basically a desert because humans, overused it.
Oh, totally.
And so I'm sure there were a lot more animals living there back in the day.
Yeah, so that's one of the things they talk about is that like this would have been a really beautiful place, this hill. It would have looked over like this really beautiful like paradise land, and you know the Black Sea was like way higher, and there was this ice thing that was like a couple thousand miles away that really like it was beautiful. Apparently
It was a paradise.
it was a paradise.
Yeah.
So the next theory that I want to talk about, because we're on crazy theories right now,
Woo-hoo!
is that there Robert M. Schoch is probably how you pronounce that. He's a
Sure.
Scotch?
Wow.
who knows? He's an associate professor of natural sciences at the College of General Studies.
I love that name, the College of General Studies.
It is a 2-year non-degree granting unit of the Boston University. So take this with a grain of salt. It says
I could have got in there.
Yeah, me too. Wouldn't that be embarrassing to have a degree from those guys? Except you can't get a degree.
Well, Dad, I was accepted. Where? Oh, you're not going there.
No.
You're not going there.
No.
We're not paying for that.
So he thinks that there's a connection with the Easter Island, and also he thinks it's Stonehenge is also connected. He thinks basically like every single monolithic prehistoric site is all connected, that they were all built at the same time, including the pyramids.
And they're all built at the same time by whom? The aliens?
Oh, well, so he comes in with like a theory that I'm going to talk about next. That is, he kind of partners with this other guy at this other theory. We're in the crazy theories, guys. We're in the crazies.
All right, so we're deep down in the bottom.
Deep
here.
in the
Okay.
crazies. So he's quoted as saying, both the Moai and the anthropomorphic central pillars of Göbekli Tepe have arms and hands positioned similarly against the body, with hands and fingers extended over the belly and navel region. The Moai are looking at the sky, and I believe the Göbekli Tepe pillars are also looking towards the skies. Are they looking at identical phenomenon?
Oh my God. Flying saucers?
So he thinks that there are these things called plasma events, which is a thing that we have on Earth. It's a real thing.
You're talking about a solar flare, correct?
Yeah, essentially. We see a lot of as lightning or like aurora borealis. But apparently, they used to be way more frequent, and they would have been way more apparent.
Wait, what? Why would they have been more frequent?
Well, so I guess this like a little bit makes sense to me that like the sun was still settled. I mean, this is a long time ago, and yeah, it's like a long time after the creation of the universe, but it's still a long time ago. The sun was a little more volatile, apparently.
You know, in terms of the history of the sun, though, I mean, 12,000 years ago is basically
A blink of an eye.
basically like late this morning or
Yeah.
something. Not even late this morning. It was like maybe 6 o'clock. You know?
For whatever reason, the sun was more like volatile in that period.
Okay.
Ostensibly, this is just what I could find on this theory from this dude. Like, I'm not saying that it's right or wrong, but apparently they were more. He also said,
So there's more solar flares, is what I'm getting?
yeah, I guess.
It's entirely possible the sun did go through a period of like a lot of intense solar flares. Like you've heard about the Carrington event, correct? I think it was 1856.
I remember this.
Yeah, the sun like spewed out a huge solar flare which hit the Earth. And by the way, we should be gearing up for another one because it's going to happen again sooner or later. But this big solar flare hits the planet, and basically a lot of aurora borealis type stuff in the sky. But it also fried what little we had in terms of electronics. Then was maybe telegraph lines, but telegraph offices caught on fire and stuff like that. I mean, our crude infrastructure was kind of
decimated,
kind of destroyed. Yeah, and so imagine what would happen today.
Yeah,
those things hit.
So
really.
So that's a possibility.
It's a lot of solar activity that is then hitting our atmosphere, causing these things.
Yeah.
Over a period of, I'm guessing, hundreds of years, there's a lot of it going on to encourage this kind of activity.
It would have to go on for a while, yeah.
There's this other guy named Anthony Perrott, and he's a Los Alamos plasma physicist. And they apparently have established that there are some petroglyphs that have been found worldwide that record a really intense plasma event or events in prehistory. He's determined that powerful plasma phenomenon observed in the skies take on characteristic shapes resembling humanoid figures and humans with bird heads, sets of rings or donut shapes, and writhing snakes or serpents.
I'm not buying that.
Which are just...
Yeah.
Can I say projection once again?
Yeah.
Yeah, you totally can. So they also address the backfill. This is the only theory that really addresses the backfill.
Oh, okay. I'm game for this.
So basically they say, there were roofs on there. They say they backfilled it so that they would be protected from the plasma events.
So they built these.
I'm
They
not
built
on board
these.
with that.
Yeah, they built these things for some reason, the plasma.
Because they saw it in the sky and they
decided to build these
hundreds
structures.
of years quarrying rocks that were like super...
hide from it.
And then
Yeah.
they decided to fill them in to protect them from the same things that they built them for.
Yeah.
Because they understood that it was radiation and that if you were underground, you could have a fallout shelter.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
So I just don't-
I was on
That's
board with that
a little
right
silly.
up until that point.
No, I don't like that theory. So to go along with this theory, there's another theory. It's called the third party theory. It's been developed by this man named Graham Hancock. He's a mother culture proponent, and according to his Wikipedia site, he specializes in, quote, unconventional theories.
What is mother culture?
So it's this theory.
Okay. Okay. I didn't know if it was something different. Okay.
Yeah,
Sorry.
no, but it's all the same.
All right.
So as it pertains to Gulbeke Tepe, but it also pertains to a lot of basically everything that this other guy was saying. They're all connected. This guy says that there's this long forgotten third branch of humanity that evolved way faster than we did and did all of this stuff and then was just wiped out 10,000 years ago and we
Okay.
forgot about them.
Okay.
And they built this thing. That makes
All right.
sense, right?
Actually, yeah, I feel really bad.
Okay.
Because when I was reading this and everybody was saying, well, man wasn't evolved enough, I started looking in and wondering, well, when did the Cro-Mags go away? Well, the Cro-Mags went away 30,000 years ago, so it couldn't have been them. So then I was thinking, well, maybe it was some culture. I didn't necessarily think that it was some offshoot of humanity in terms of another Homo sapien line, but what if it was some culture that was isolated from all their hunter-gatherer warring neighbors for whatever reason? They start to move along and evolve and use tools and do these things, become really peaceful, and they can cultivate grain and all that stuff. And then they build the whole thing, and then everybody finds them.
Sure.
But they're peaceful, so everybody else is going, you're freaking me out. I'm going to hit you with my axe because that's what I do to things that freak me out.
But
So we're talking about for this one site, right? Because this theory pertains to literally every monolithic prehistoric
I'm
site.
I'm just saying Gobekli.
Okay, and I'm willing to a little bit get on board with you on that. As far as if we're saying it's just this one thing, but he says even the pyramids were built at the same time as all this other stuff because it looks like there was rain damage to it, and the only time that Egypt has ever had rain that much was in 10,000 years ago. So obviously they were built 10,000 years ago. Along with the Moai at Easter Island, along with all of the stuff down in South America, all of the, nothing in North America because we're not special. So he says it's all of these were created by this mother culture, which I think a lot of people kind of attribute to the ancient aliens.
and the mother culture. So the mother culture was basically all over the world.
So it was a offshoot, not humans, but an offshoot of humanity that spread and then died for some reason.
Yep.
And disappeared.
And
didn't look any different from us on a bone structure level. So we can't
or a
help it.
DNA level or anything like that, right? But if they were that sophisticated, they should have left a lot more ruins.
Yep. Yeah.
Well, no, they were using the those awesome skimmers that you get from the aliens.
Oh yeah.
And so, what was the movie? It was the Flash Gordon skimmers.
Yeah.
So they were jumping for all over the world and then building their new sites. That's what it is. They had
That's
Flash
totally what
Gordon wake runners of the sky.
You're right.
Yeah.
Gotta
okay.
be what it is.
Okay,
yeah.
so now we're gonna go.
Sorry if you believe in aliens. I just sound like a total jerk there, and I apologize.
Anyway, now to address your theory that these guys that built Gobekli Tepe were a peaceful culture, that's just highly unlikely. I mean, they were it's kind of like if you're a rabbit and you're in the woods, living in the woods, and you decide, you and your bunch of rabbits decide, hey, we're not going to sweat this whole predator thing. We're just going to go out and eat our grass and just pretend like they don't. I mean, the whole thing. I mean, man lived in this environment of scarcity and conflict and warfare. I mean, that's our history. It's in our DNA. So the idea of a peaceful culture somehow popping up is like kind of hard to believe.
Well, but you could. I mean
maybe on.
Think about, if you ever looked at the maps, and again, this is something that I saw, let's say, in the Cro-Magnon Man, is if you look at where Cro-Magnon Man was, and then you look where Homo sapiens started, and then how we encroached in, it might have been that these guys were just kind of in a pocket. I mean, have you ever been in the woods and you came across something and you realize that there's an old tractor parked there that's probably been there for 50 or 70 years and nobody's messed with it? It's just kind of a random spot. It could be that they were just in a lucky zone that nobody had gone to for whatever reason. I mean, it's plausible. I'm not saying that's what it is, but I think it's plausible that a group of people could live in an area for an extended period of time and never be found. I mean, we are finding people in South America today still that still have no clue who the hell we are.
Yeah, I mean, but again, and that's possible, but those cultures aren't going to be by any sense advanced, because in any culture that's that isolated, where it's just a small pocket of people off somewhere, they're, in isolation from the rest of humanity, with no trading back and forth of ideas and stuff, then you simply don't advance.
This was the prehistoric engineers. It was a group of engineers.
Yeah, it could have been.
Drop back in time. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm making fun.
That's a good point, though. It might be that. And this might be the... They
might have been predisposed to, figuring things out like that rather than just going with the status quo. That's all I want to say.
Imagine this, how this ties in with, say, the Adam and Eve legend. Say these two really, really hyper-intelligent people somehow find each other, copulate, have children, start a little tribe of very smart people, and they do actually wind up doing all kinds of amazing things.
We're going to talk about that.
Actually. Oh, are we?
I mean, kind of, a little bit. Yeah, so we're going to talk about that because we have arrived at the biblical theories.
Dun, dun, dun.
So there's, I guess, we'll just go into it and then we'll have the discussions as we go.
Dun, dun, dun.
That noise exactly.
Okay.
Awesome.
Yeah. So the first one is a Noah's Ark theory. No, I think it's totally fair. I mean, I think it's a pretty easy leap to make, right? I mean, it's like this large, huge collection of animals from a prehistoric time, from what a lot of people identify as a biblical time, right? In the biblical land. Okay. All right, I can kind of see how...
This is, again, getting back to the variety of animals that are carved in the stone.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, so this is where this theory is being lent from. Okay,
yeah.
All right. Just so I get my frame of reference.
So it's, like a lot of animals that probably aren't really from, around there, as far as we can tell. And again, who knows what was there, what wasn't, how much we're projecting, fine, whatever. And Gobekli Tepe is 350 miles from where biblical scholars are pretty sure that Noah's Ark would have ended up. If you kind of look at the Bible stories as parables, kind of accepting this place as a place that everybody was like, oh, hey, that totally existed. There are a lot of problems with this theory. It's not a really sound theory.
Okay, wait. So it's been a long time since I've read the Bible, and I will admit this. Where was Noah from? Was he from Haran? Or?
You know what? As far as I can tell, he was from Mesopotamia at large.
Sure? The general area?
I mean, it's also been a while for me. I'll be honest with you. And I don't recall it being in my research. I didn't see anything where they were like, and he was from here, so blah, blah, blah. I think the more important part of the whole story is where he ended up, not where he started.
Okay.
Because he was in the flood. I mean, are you kidding me? He was on this giant boat in the flood.
That went all over the world.
The whole world, or maybe just the whole world as
maybe
everyone
just the Black
knew
Sea,
it. But okay, the whole world, it flooded, and then they ended up someplace.
Which sounds way more interesting when you say it that way than that John Cusack movie about it.
Yeah, I
Which one's
never
that?
see that.
You're talking about 2012?
Yeah.
Oh, that was so bad. That was so bad.
I never saw it.
Anyway, so where are they saying that Noah's came to rest, his ship came to rest at Göbekli Tepe?
And I mean, it's, if you take it as like most people kind of take those stories as parables at this point, right? I mean, like, Noah probably didn't really make a giant ark.
It's not a factual recording.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that this would have been some sort of like representation of the ark, of the preserving of all of the species that were there at that time, which is a fair thing to say about it because essentially it may be a preserving.
Somebody was like, it was kind of like a Smithsonian Institute or something like that.
Sort of,
kind of like just keeping a recording of everything.
Yeah. You mentioned Haran though, and is another big one. They're the two like big ones that everybody talks about. And Haran, they think, is like 25 miles from Göbekli Tepe.
Okay. So it's in the vicinity.
So they're really close. Yeah, really close. There are some problems with this. One is that like Abraham was a pretty smart guy and he lived in Haran, and if this were a Noah's Ark situation, the theories get a little confused, but like he would have known about this place, but the flood happened after Abraham, so he wouldn't have known about this place, but Abraham definitely didn't exist in 10,000 BC.
And this place would have been
much later than
this place would have been long buried.
And this place would have been long buried, so that's not so much of a problem for me, except that Bob Ballard did this expedition in the Black Sea, and he found a bunch of stuff. A lot of stuff. Amazing stuff that was it was mostly like flooded